for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson.
I am Jack Prince.
Jack, we have got to talk about an update to the plot to kidnap and murder Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. The two big fish that were hooked by the feds have been sentenced to quite a lengthy prison sentence. So we got to talk about that a little bit. We also have to talk.
Absolutely.
We have to talk about Lauren Boebert. Her restaurant that failed is now going to become a restaurant again, but probably not what she wanted. We also have to talk about some more vandalization at power plants, this time on the West Coast. This is scary stuff, folks, and this really needs to be reported on. Congressman Jamie Raskin announces he has cancer. We'll talk about that. We have a couple of off-the-cuff segments and a couple of Hammer Time Awards this week. And, Jack, you got to talk about the new Republican congressman from New York. Apparently he followed Trump and is just nothing but a pathological liar.
Yeah, this is the idiot that just, I think it was last year, tweeted that, and I read this absolutely word for word, that Biden was a pathological liar. And yeah, I called him a pathological liar in a tweet last year. But you know, the thing is that we've seen horrendous lies. 35,000 from Trump, and of course Walker was the cherry, at least next to the top of the cake. Now at the top of the cake, maybe the supreme. Maybe they were all just the foothills for this guy, because this guy is a total lie. Everything about the guy. It's amazing what they've uncovered. I'm more amazed that the Democratic Party didn't snag any of these, didn't get any insight into any of these lies, because once you broke one, you quickly could have gone through the whole list, although the list grows by the hour.
Yeah.
Because that was a costly seat. The House, was still up for grabs, and we got to talk about that when we get into it, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's something that can still be done. We'll discuss that in just a little bit here. Before we get started with today's show, a couple of reminders. You can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Mastodon. We have a link on our official Facebook page. It'll take you right there. Just do a search at mastodon.com for Southpaws. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Tumblr, Mastodon, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern. And you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. Be sure to listen to us there. And yes, we are still officially boycotting our own Twitter page until Elon Musk fully restores the accounts of all the journalists that he has banned and shadow banned. So there you go. We'll start posting when he gets his head out of his ass, which I'm not going to hold my breath for that one, because I don't know who's doing more stupid stuff, him or the incoming Congressman Santos. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. We got to get to our top story this week. It's actually two stories, but they're tied together. This is Joy Capoletti and Corey Williams writing for the Associated Press. This is dated, the first one was dated Tuesday. They're both out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Jack, oh, happy day. Justice has finally been served. The co-leader of a plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer was sentenced Tuesday to 16 years in prison for conspiring to abduct the Democrat and blow up a bridge to ease an escape. Let me add, kidnap and murder Governor Gretchen Whitmer. They were going to kill her.
Yes, they were.
And
everything from supposed hanging to putting her on a boat in the middle of Lake Michigan. And I can't get over how quiet the so-called excuse that this was just an FBI setup, that these men were set up. Take a look at a picture. They're like cartoon characters. They're like characters out of a Batman movie. Mm-hmm. And you look at their record, which they really haven't elucidated. This Croft was a hardened criminal in and out of prison, and a long list of robbery and violence, et cetera, et cetera. And this guy was forced into this by the FBI. This clown and the one you mentioned, Fox, gets 16 years. The demand or the call by the prosecution was for life. That wouldn't have been too much, in my estimation.
Exactly. And I would have gone further if I had been the prosecutor. I would have asked for the death penalty. Sorry, that's treason. Treason is punishable by death in this country.
Yeah.
So there you go. Adam Fox's sentence at the time Tuesday was the longest of anyone convicted in the plot so far, but that changed the following day when Barry Croft got 20 years in prison. So let's stick with Fox first. The 39-year-old Fox, who, by the way, at the time of his arrest was living in the basement of the Vac Shack over at 36th and Division in Grand Rapids, returned to federal court 4 months after he and Barry Croft Jr. were convicted of conspiracy charges at a second trial in Grand Rapids. They were accused of organizing a wild plot to whip up anti-government extremists just before the 2020 presidential election. Their arrest, as well as the capture of 12 others, was a stunning coda to a tumultuous year of racial strife and political turmoil in the U.S. The government said Croft offered bomb-making skills and ideology, while Fox was, according to prosecutors, quote, the driving force urging their recruits to take up arms, kidnap the governor, and kill those who stood in their way, end of quote.
We're talking about kidnapping the governor at her vacation home to ignite a civil war. That's how close the idiots are to the front door.
Yes, they are.
And for him to say to Trump, just give us the green light on these liberals, and we'll take the trash out. We'll take the trash out for humanity's sake. Appealing directly to Trump. That's the whole catalyst. That's the lodestar in the middle of the universe, Trump. These idiots have their actions propelled by Donald J. Trump.
Absolutely.
And this quote, I haven't heard him push that. I haven't really had them elucidate the connection between Trump and his motivation for these guys, but it was there. It was clearly there. And then on top of that, from Bear, Delaware, Croft had a criminal record a mile long.
Yeah.
These were idiots. These were criminal punk idiots. Mm-hmm. And now they are a species that roam the street, that you see them on Facebook. They're out there. You know they've got something else up their sleeve. They're ubiquitous.
Absolutely. Continuing in the story, but Judge Robert J. Yonker said that while Fox's sentence was needed as a punishment and deterrent to future similar acts, the government's request for life in prison is, quote, not necessary to achieve those purposes, end of quote. Yonker said, quote, it's too much, something less than life gets the job done in this case, end of quote. He added later, the 16 years behind bars, quote, is still in my mind a very long time, end of quote. No, 16 years is a quarter in football in comparison to all of life. Give me a break.
It most certainly is. And you have to put on that scale of justice the crime, the immensity of the crime. 16 years is a long time to be in a book club, but you know what? For the consequences of that crime, the severity of that crime, the magnitude of that crime, 16 years is pale. That's ridiculous. Who was this guy?
Judge Robert Yonker.
looking for the good in people. He believes in the good of people.
Oh, yeah, I'll get into that when we start talking about Croft here. Let me go ahead and continue. Yonker said he also considered the emotional baggage Whitmer has to carry due to the plot, saying, quote, "It undoubtedly affects other people who are in public office or are considering public office. They have to count the cost. That does need a forceful sentence from the court," end of quote. In addition to the prison sentence, Fox will have to serve 5 years of supervised release. He'll also get credit for more than 2 years in custody since his arrest. U.S. Attorney Andrew Burge told reporters outside the courtroom following the sentencing, quote, "Responding to domestic terrorism plots has been a priority for the Department of Justice since its founding, and we're going to continue to spare no expense to make sure we disrupt plots like these," end of quote. Fox wore orange prison clothes with long slick back hair and a full beard. He showed little reaction when the sentence was read. Yeah, his prison clothes looked a lot like Donald Trump's skin color.
Yeah.
Daniel Harris, who was acquitted by a jury earlier this year for his involvement in the plot, sat next to Fox's mother in the gallery and hugged her after the sentencing was read. Fox looked into the gallery multiple times, often mouthing words. He shook his head and repeatedly smirked while Assistant U.S. Attorney Nils Kessler spoke. Kessler said Fox's smirking was a sign that he showed no regret. Fox and Croft were convicted at a second trial in August, months after a different Grand Rapids jury couldn't reach a verdict but acquitted Harris and one other man. Croft, a trucker from Bear, Delaware, will be sentenced Wednesday, which he was. We'll get to that in just a minute here. In 2020, Fox and Croft met with like-minded provocateurs in Ohio, trained with weapons in Michigan and Wisconsin, and took a ride to put eyes on Whitmer's vacation home with night vision goggles, according to evidence from the government. Fox declared that spring, quote, "People need to stop with the misplaced anger and place the anger where it should go, and that's against our tyrannical government," end of quote. Fox and the others were boiling over COVID-19 restrictions and perceived threats to gun ownership, which, let me just tell you, folks, it ain't happening. Oh, the Democrats are coming to take our guns. Has it ever happened in history, Jack?
No.
Never.
But look at the mess that boiled out of their meeting at a gun show, right? As my understanding, Croft and Fox bumped into each other in Ohio at a gun show. Mm-hmm. And it happens continuously.
Whitmer wasn't physically harmed. The FBI, which was secretly embedded in the group, broke things up by fall. In a court filing ahead of the hearing, Kessler said, quote, "They had no real plan for what to do with the governor if they actually seized her. Paradoxically, this made them more dangerous, not less," end of quote. Yeah, because
exactly.
They'd be like wild dogs with red meat in front of them.
Yeah, mob mentality.
Yep. At the time, Fox was living in the basement of a Grand Rapids area vacuum shop, the site of clandestine meetings with members of a paramilitary group and an undercover FBI agent. His lawyer, Christopher Gibbons, said he was depressed, anxious, and smoking marijuana daily. Gibbons said a life sentence would be extreme. He told reporters after Tuesday's sentencing, quote, "My client stands on the record, maintains his innocence, and he looks forward to getting it all before the panel at the Court of Appeals," end of quote. Yonker said there was nothing that made him think of Fox as a natural leader, but said conspiracies like the plot to kidnap Whitmer take a lot of fuel and that Fox provided it. Yonker adding, quote, "It's important to recognize the likelihood of this ever happening, thank God, was low because law enforcement was on it early. I think the chances of this actually happening were incredibly remote," end of quote. In arguing Tuesday for a life sentence, Kessler said, quote, "I think you could say that none of this would have happened if Mr. Fox was not involved. They wanted a second civil war or revolution. They wanted to ruin everything for everybody. This wasn't about masks or about vaccines. They were talking about overthrowing the government before the coronavirus pandemic. They had enough guns and armor for a small war," end of quote.
Yeah. And whether or not that would have been successful has nothing to do with the depth of guilt in these men's mind. Nothing.
They have no guilt. They really don't. They don't show remorse. And I bet if you asked them,
that's the point. That's what I'm trying to say. They, as that facial expression showed, they haven't realized the impact of what they did at all. And for the judge to say, well, these guys are so stupid, I'm paraphrasing, they never could have pulled this off, is inconsequential.
Absolutely. Gibbons, Fox's attorney, said that Fox was regularly exposed to inflammatory rhetoric by the FBI informants, especially Army veteran Dan Chappell, who, quote, manipulated not only Fox's sense of patriotism, but also his need for friendship, acceptance, and male approval, end of quote. Yeah, bullshit. I call that.
Yeah.
No, that's not accurate whatsoever.
Exactly. The guy was thrown out of the house. He broke up with his girlfriend, and he lived with them, her family. He threw his butt out, and somebody had pity on him and put him in the basement. That's who he is. That's who these guys are. They're bums. They weren't manipulated in any way. It's horse crap.
Yep. Two men who pleaded guilty to conspiracy and testified against Fox and Croft received substantial breaks of between 2.5 years and 4 years behind bars. 3 members of a paramilitary group that trained with Fox were convicted in October of providing material support for a terrorist act. Their sentences, handed down earlier this month in state court, ranged between 7 to 12 years. 5 more are awaiting trial in Antrim County, where Whitmer's vacation home is located. When the plot was extinguished, Whitmer blamed Donald Trump, saying he had given, quote, comfort to those who spread fear and hatred and division, end of quote.
My point exactly.
Trump's response in August was that he called the kidnapping plan a, quote, fake deal, end of quote. No, fake is what you get when you buy one of those NFTs off of the orange pig. So let's go to the following day. Once again, Joey Capoletti and Corey Williams writing for the Associated Press out of Grand Rapids. A Delaware trucker described as an architect of the conspiracy to kidnap Michigan's governor was sentenced Wednesday to more than 19 years in prison, the longest term yet given to anyone convicted in the plot. Prosecutors had sought a life sentence for 47-year-old Barry Croft Jr., who was the 4th and final federal defendant to learn his fate. Judge Robert J. Yonker described him as the idea guy behind the plot and called him, quote, a very convincing communicator, end of quote, for people who were open to his views. The judge added, quote, however twisted or irrational it may seem to many of us, it did resonate to the targeted audience. That is as important a method of leadership as being out in the field telling people where to go, end of quote. Yeah, I'd like to tell Barry Croft where he can go and how he can get there.
Yeah. You know, and we have enough pinhead rednecks, red hats in this state. We don't need to get any from Bear, Delaware.
Yeah, defense attorney Joshua Blanchard said that he would appeal the sentence. Croft was convicted in August of conspiracy charges. He was also found guilty of possessing an unregistered explosive. So he was really deep into it.
He certainly was.
Before announcing Croft's sentence, Yonker said, quote, we're talking about a conspiracy to physically kidnap the governor, potentially assassinate her as well. It doesn't get much more serious than that. The group had a lot of guns. This group had all kinds of material ready to go to achieve their end, end of quote.
They're ready to blow a bridge up on 31 to prohibit the police from getting to them.
Absolutely. Assistant U.S. Attorney Nils Kessler called Croft the spiritual leader of the group of conspirators, comparing his role to that of, quote, some sheik in ISIS, end of quote.
Good comparison.
That is a great comparison. Kessler continued, quote, he essentially was putting himself as a role of a prophet. There are people who believe this sort of rhetoric, and he used it. This man is fully radicalized. He hasn't changed his viewpoint. He's not admitting the ideas are wrong because he still holds them. This whole thing was Mr. Croft's idea. End of quote. Governor Whitmer's office declined to comment Wednesday. She said in August that the guilty verdicts proved that, quote, those who seek to divide us will be held accountable. End of quote. She added that such plots are, quote, a disturbing extension of radicalized domestic terrorism, end of quote, that threaten, quote, the very foundation of our republic, end of quote. Croft regularly wore the type of tricorn hat common during the American Revolution and had tattoos on his arms symbolizing resistance, such as Expect Us, as he traveled to Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan to meet with like-minded extremists. Kessler said in court documents that the abduction was meant to be the beginning of a, quote, reign of terror, end of quote. Croft's plans called for riots, torching government officials in their sleep, and setting off violence across the country. In one key piece of evidence, Croft, Fox, and others traveled to see Whitmer's vacation home in northern Michigan with undercover agents and informants inside the cabal. At one point, Croft told allies, quote, I don't like seeing anybody get killed either, but you don't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. You know what I mean? End of quote. Yeah, he's an egghead, so you ought to know.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. I'm afraid he's pretty typical. They're out there. And the guy that was given the motivation by ideologues to take a hammer to this 82-year-old's head in San Francisco. And I know we're going to talk about this in a minute, but the knuckleheads that are destroying power electric stations, putting millions of people in the dark, causing all kinds of heartache, they have the idea that the government is totally and completely needful of being eradicated, and there's nothing too violent. There's nothing that they don't warrant and justify, and it's ripe on the tree in our nation. It's there. It's around. It's all around. We passed it. I went down Division Street to see my daughter 3 or 4 times a week. I went right by the vacuum shop, and there's other ones in other shops. They're out there. They're violent. They've got a propensity to take some half-baked ideology that Trump spins and Bannon spins, and they think they're laying hold of the truth. There's nothing more dangerous than the stupid thinking they're smart. A lot of stupid kind of got a hunch they're stupid, and they live with it. But these people in their own mind have been elevated now to wise patriots that know the remedy to our problems. It's horrifying.
Croft's attorney tried to soften his client's role. In a court filing, Blanchard said Croft did not actually have authority over others and often frustrated them because he just kept talking. He said Wednesday that Croft, quote, went way down a conspiracy rabbit hole, end of quote. Blanchard was seeking a sentence less than life. Blanchard told the judge, quote, when the pandemic touched off, a lot of people went down a similar rabbit hole, and suddenly Mr. Croft was connected with a lot of people who felt the same way he did, end of quote. Blanchard, who got emotional in the courtroom when speaking about Croft's 3 children, told reporters outside the courthouse that the sentence means Croft will not get to see his kids grow up. Well, that's
best
probably
thing for the kids.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. Blanchard also maintained that Croft wasn't the ideas guy he's been portrayed as. He insisted that, quote, most of what Mr. Croft said was excluded because the government didn't want the jury to hear it, end of quote. So there you go. So I tell you what, let's tie this right in to our next segment here.
Stop. Hammer time.
Oh, yeah, it's hammer time. And it is time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week. 3 winners for you this week. And the first one, we've just been talking about the judge, Robert J. Yonker. He gets the douchebag of the week for not sentencing Fox and Croft to life in prison because he sees the good in other people. I don't see any good in them. They're
I was going to say,
rotten.
could you make a list of what good you see in Adam Fox or Barry Croft?
Absolutely. So winner number 1, Judge Robert J. Yonker. Winners number 2 and 3 this week. You can take your pick as to which one is number 2. They both qualify. Representative Lauren Boebert, Cuckoo, Colorado, and Representative Matthew Gates, Cuckoo of Florida. So Bobo and Butthead get the award for not standing up during Ukrainian President Zelensky's address to Congress last week. They sat there like 2 bumps on a log.
Yeah, you can rightfully call them winners of the douchebag award, very much so. But you know what? I am so disgusted with the entire contingent of so-called enlightened left that thinks somehow Ukraine and Zelensky are really covers for some Nazi movement. I hear the reservation now about continuing financial aid coming out of the Republicans, and I see these water droplets forming together to justify stopping the spread of authoritarianism in the man Putin with all of these. It's just like the false misinformation with the COVID. that there's Nazis hiding in the hills, that they've got a Nazi flag on some building somewhere. It's ridiculous. The country is fighting for its survival. His appearance here matched Churchill's in its magnitude, in his grandeur, his speech, the conviction, and the strength of the man that's been through hell for how many months. And he's standing there. I can't think of an equivalent. I wasn't here when Churchill spoke. It was moved. He had 18 standing ovations. Was it 18 or 8?
I'm not sure.
It was amazing. And these two lugheads sat there on their butts.
Mm-hmm.
Boebert and Getz.
Yeah, they might have gotten brain damage from sitting on them too long.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so to Judge Robert J. Yonker, to Bobo and Butthead, we've got this message for you.
Don't be a douchebag.
Don't be a douche.
Absolutely. You all need to stop being douchebags. Oh, my God. Oh. Speaking of Bobo the Clown, I have this story. This is Madison Hall writing for Insider, formerly Business Insider. This is dated December 27th. The location of Republican Representative Lauren Boebert's shuttered firearm-themed restaurant is being filled by a Mexican restaurant.
That's appropriate.
This is called karma.
Yeah. Hey, how about a vegan restaurant? That would have been really justice.
Ooh, vegan and Mexican.
Yeah.
While serving in Congress, Boebert has been a staunch advocate of stricter border policies at the Mexico-United States border, especially supporting the notion of building a wall between the two countries. Oh, geez. She characterized many of the border crossers as illegals, noting in May that under Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, quote, millions of illegals, including rapists, drug dealers, and criminals on the terrorist watch list have crossed the southern border, end of quote. She has called for Mayorkas to be removed from office. God, sounds like Trump. Yeah. Just a little higher pitch, maybe.
Yeah, and the sickening thing is she won by what? Just a razor-thin margin.
Just a fraction. And that was actually surprising to me. It was very surprising. Yeah. Because at the early tallying of the votes, she was down by a lot. I was hoping.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Prior to joining Congress, Boebert opened Shooter's Grill in Rifle, Colorado, a restaurant where waitresses proudly holstered guns on the job and customers could order dishes like the M16 burrito and a bump stock corned beef hash. Yeah, they call it the M16 burrito because of what it does to your toilet after you eat one.
No kidding.
You think Taco Bell's bad? I can only imagine.
As if those beer guts need any ammunition, right?
Yeah, no kidding. There goes the M16, Jack.
Oh.
I needed to laugh. I am sorry. I am loopy. I have been up since about 2:30 this morning. Oh, man.
Well, I told you the story. I saw that place. I drove into its parking lot. And it looked like the Dukes of Hazzard, guys with their feet up on the railing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, really. Like a T-shirt that's 3 inches higher than the bottom of the guy's waist, sitting around.
It's funny you mentioned Dukes of Hazzard. Apparently, John Schneider, who played one of the Duke boys, is quite the trumper.
Oh, that's too bad. That's sad.
It is. It's disgusting. In July, Shooter's Grill closed its doors for good after the landlord did not renew its lease, according to a tweet from Bobo herself. The New York Times also noted that the landlord also booted the Congresswoman's campaign office, which was located next door to the location.
Good.
Bobo said in her tweet that the decision was his to make was purely a business decision with no political motivation. Oh, yeah, I'm sure that's how it worked there, sweetheart.
Yeah, sure. He welcomed your idiocy. He'd love to see it. Yeah.
Oh, God.
But, there's a little cat fight going between her and Marjorie Greene.
Yes, that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
We've kind of briefly touched on that the last couple of weeks. Yeah. Isn't one of them supporting McCarthy for speaker, and the other one says nope?
Yeah, she sits right behind him now in the House seating, and she'll do anything for him as long as she can have that position, including support him. So,
yeah.
But we really get confused just trying to even figure out their motives. So I am more intrigued with the absolute facts coming out on the condition of these candidates. I don't know when you're ready to go to Santos, but to me,
we might as well just get right into it right now. Why not?
This is a man. If anybody wants to know what the good barometer is to indicate how rotten and despicable the GOP leadership is, just two words. I mean, really, now Santos and Walker. That's the absolute litmus test of how idiotic, liars, ideologues these guys are. This Santos lied from who his family was, that they had a Jewish name. He claimed he was with Goldman Sachs when he wasn't. He claimed that he went to a prep school, a very exclusive prep school in New York called, I think it's called Horace Mann. And the truth is they have no record of him. The affiliation with the 9/11, some of his workers supposedly were there. It was all bull crap. The workplace that he supposedly helped animals, saved animals, that his mother was at the Trade Center on 9/11. It goes on. He never graduated from any college. He lied about that. But here's the question, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a question to you, Darren. Where the hell was the Democratic vetting on this? This was the elephant in the room that had painted toenails, and nobody thought. He also lied about his being gay, evidently, because we find out now he was married. Could any of this, or was any of this elucidated by the Democrat in that district?
Where was any vetting by any of the two parties? Well, one party, because it's the corporate party, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, this wasn't hard. This is a phone call to the college. You can do it in 5 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, the Democrats dropped the ball big time on this one. I'll say that.
I mean, it was a little important, wasn't it? The balance of the House rested with this guy. So you may have done some work looking up this guy's past. I'm still flabbergasted.
Well, there's still a chance if the rumbles continue to go on with this. What do you think the chances are that leadership in the House will refuse to seat him?
What are the chances of that?
Yeah.
A day ago, I would have said maybe not that great, but there's such a momentum going now, and there are some Republicans coming out and saying this is absolutely uncanny. This is incredible. I think that momentum may get them to a point where they turn on him. They didn't a 2/3 vote.
Yeah, I believe so. And not only that, he might be in legal trouble too, because he made the claim that he self-funded his campaign. Well,
where do you get the money?
Not so much. 700 grand came from a corporation that he supposedly owns. Here's the problem with that. You can't track where the money came from.
No, that's criminal.
So it's dark money, it's criminal, and he could go to prison for a few years over this. I really hope there is a deep investigation into him. By the way, apparently one of the local prosecutors in New York State, who is a Republican, said that there's going to be a big investigation into George Santos.
Good. Rightfully so. Again, if you go into family fare and you see a woman giving samples of a cookie, right? And they hand you two cookies, for one of them is Herschel Walker and the other is Santos. And that's indicative of the Republican Party. Are you kidding me? They could be little dog droppings. It couldn't be any worse than this. Buy a box of these. Take a bite.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's like left and right Twix. There's no difference. There really isn't. Yeah, and by the way, the owners of Twix can go ahead and pay us for our shameless plug for them.
We'll take some money.
Absolutely. Yeah, who makes Twix? That's Mars, isn't it? I
think so. I like it.
Yeah, and apparently they're lobbying to get the estate tax pulled because it's still a family-owned business, and the inheritance tax goes away. It would save them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because Bernie Sanders has called them out on it.
Well, they know if that bloodhound's on their trail, they're in trouble.
Yep, they absolutely are. Speaking of trouble, we got to go to our next story here. This is Brasida Holgan writing for KIRO Television. This is out of Graham, Washington, dated December 26th. After over 14,000 people in Pierce County celebrated Christmas in the dark, Tacoma Public Utilities restored power to their substations Monday afternoon. The Sheriff's Department says 4 utility substations were vandalized early Sunday morning. So this is a repeat of what happened in North Carolina a few weeks ago. You think this is coincidence? Or
No.
is this something that's possibly bigger brewing that we don't even know about yet?
No, it's a attack against the government that brings a chill down my spine. One, for the ease. I mean, these places are all over the country, and they're, for the most part, completely uncontrolled.
Mm-hmm.
And for the amount of devastation an idiot with a shotgun can do. I mean, really, it's scary. And no, this is not isolated. It is part of a scheme, just like the January 6th episode was. And who knows what the next level is, Darren?
Yeah. KIRO interviewed Thomas Morasada, who is a resident in the area. He said, quote, "I woke up and the power was out," end of quote. Isaiah Williams said, quote, "We live right over there off 224th and we lost power. Actually, it's kind of been sporadic. It was off pretty much when everyone woke up, and then it came back around maybe 2 hours ago for like literally 10 seconds, and then it went off. And then her mom lives down off 94th Avenue over there, and the same thing happened to them too," end of quote. The Safeway on the corner of 224th and Meridian was running on a backup generator. Morasada said, quote, "A lot of lights are out. They are not selling any refrigerated items, no frozen items," end of quote. That's pretty bad when one of the largest grocery store chains is not selling refrigerated or frozen items because of a power outage.
Oh, it is. I mean, look how fast they can bring a community or larger, a whole region, to its knees.
Yeah, with very little effort.
With very little effort.
Yeah. The Pierce County Sheriff's Department says just before 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, they received a call of a burglary to the Tacoma Public Utility Substation off 46th Avenue in Graham. Sergeant Darren Moss Jr., spokesperson with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, said, quote, "When the deputies got there was nobody on scene, but they saw that the fence area had been broken into. In this one, the suspects cut one of the locks on the fenced area, made their way inside, and caused damage to the substation," end of quote. Shortly after the Sheriff's Department was notified, the substation off 224th Street was also vandalized. Deputies called Puget Sound Energy, which also provides power in the area, and they confirmed that their substation off 144th Street was also hit. Moss said, quote, "All three happened in the middle of the night on Christmas Day, causing power outages. Nothing was stolen in those facilities, so it's a good possibility they are related," end of quote.
Oh.
Morasada said, quote, "If I had to talk to those people, I'd just say, come on, it's Christmas. Why are you going to do that to people?" End of quote. Yeah.
Well, the fact that they did is revealing. The fact that they chose Christmas and the time when families gather because they want to be as stinky and despicable as they possibly can to bring attention to themselves. I don't think this is much more than the first 2 pages of Chapter 1, though, Darren.
I think you're right.
All we've got going for us is some cold weather right now, but hang on.
Yeah.
Well, if Trump they're already threatening, if Trump gets indicted, that all hell's going to break loose. And there was a time when those threats just kind of blew over our head. But now, not so much. You know, we need to be objective and see where we're at. If we're going to protect ourselves and democracy, we've got to call a spade with this.
Absolutely. And you got to be vulgar about it, like I have been for the last several years.
Yeah.
You can't be nice about it. You can't pussyfoot around with it. You got to hit it head on, bluntly.
Exactly. It's true.
As of now, authorities don't have any suspect leads. They're asking folks who live near the 3 substations to check their security cameras for any suspicious activity between the hours of 2 and 6 a.m. On Sunday night, a 4th power station was attacked in Pierce County. When crews arrived at the scene at about 7:30 p.m., it was on fire. The substation is located on Kapowsin Highway near Graham, where it left more than 500 people in the area without power. The cause was reported as vandalism. Sergeant Moss says deputies will be monitoring all substations. Yeah, but how long can they do that? I mean,
there's so many stations. There's thousands of stations.
We mentioned on this show that there are counties in the state of Michigan that don't have the funding to do road patrols on a regular basis.
I know. They don't have enough police to get to a jewelry store within a half hour to stop 10, 15 bandits hauling out Christmas bags.
Mm-hmm.
How long would that take?
Oh, I know. Well, they tried it up at the Walmart in Fremont, Michigan earlier this week, and they found out that that was the wrong thing to do because Fremont has their own police force that's pretty vigilant, let me tell you.
They did it somewhere down from a recruiting station, and a bunch of Marines ran down, and they're just punks. You get behind a plastic mask. They're 18-year-old punks.
Yeah.
But they know they can get away with it. They have millions of dollars.
Yeah,
Man.
Absolutely. I tell you what, let's get to a couple of other stories, because I know you wanted to touch on some stuff besides Mr. Santos.
Well, I was going to mention, and this does seem unrelated. I'm going to skip over Mark Meadows. This is a personal experience I've had. I had some medical needs this week, and have discovered that, and I haven't got it tracked down yet, that the retired teachers in the state of Michigan, at my age, I'm a retired teacher, have been, without their knowledge, and I'm still getting information. It looks to me as if Blue Cross contracted out with a private company, a private insurance company. It's not Amana. It's called Medicare Advantage. And the reason I said it that way is because most people think Medicare Advantage is an improvement, an asset, a tangent, a tributary of Medicaid. It's not. Medicare Advantage came from a symposium of conservative ideologues around George Bush back in 2003. Can't remember the name of the bill. They passed a bill, and in that bill, it was the insurance companies, a particular insurance company, was given a right to call themselves Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave themselves the moniker, the Medicare Advantage.
Yeah.
And they have been fooling people ever since. Listen, George Bush vowed to break the public entity called Social Security.
Yeah.
And they hated Obama's programs, and they hate anything public, and they hate public Medicare. They hate it. They despise it. Bush said when he left office, he had one regret, and that is that he was not successful in breaking Social Security. So how did they do it? They know they'll never win in the ballot box. Nobody is going to vote in this country, in a majority, against Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
The way they do it is one member at a time, to get them into a private company that doesn't necessarily pay the claims, that dictates what doctors you see, that makes it impossible to leave. But more importantly, they are weakening Medicare, because every member that goes into Medicare, I'm going to say disadvantage, but advantage, weakens Medicare. At some point, it dies by itself. It's the same tactic they're doing with the public schools. And we've said it on this program. It should be mantra. The technique to dispel social programs and public benefits and public programs such as Social Security is privatization. They don't have a better card to play. It's worked in so many areas. They've used it in the military. They used it back with the post office. If you remember, Darren, back in the COVID era, they tried privatization in the post office to take that public institution down. We know what's happened in schools. We see what's happened as Grand Rapids closes buildings. It is the soup du jour for the conservatives. And the privatization comes in many, many varieties. It's got many, many cloaks. With the social program called Medicare, it's coming under the tent with the name Medicare Advantage. Don't sign up for it, folks.
Yep.
Keep away from it. You don't understand it. There's a reason you don't understand it. The Democrats in this state don't elucidate the truth to people. The Democrats in this state take a lot of money from very, very rich health insurance companies. That's a fact.
Absolutely.
And so they don't do themselves any favor politically in pointing out this tactic. This is not conspiracy. I urge people to go and Google Tom Hartman under this topic.
Yep.
Just go Medicare Advantage, Tom Hartman. It'll come up on Common Dreams. It'll come up with Truth Out. The story, the writing that he has on this is absolutely unmatched. I don't hear liberal pundits saying anything about this. You can listen to CNN till you fall asleep. They never address it. There's no local politicians. It's never an issue. But the middle class will suffer greatly when Medicare dies, and it is on the chopping block.
And let me add that a lot of Pacifica stations carry Tom Hartman's program. A lot of them carry it live. He is live 12 to 3 in the afternoon Eastern Time every Monday through Friday. And you can hear him on a lot of different Pacifica radio stations across the country.
Absolutely.
You really need to listen, folks. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you my little experience, and not me, my mother. The Carpenters Union, which is where my mom gets her pension, my dad's pension since he's passed, and also their insurance protection, health insurance, they switched over in June of this year to something that sounds like Medicare Advantage to me.
Yeah. It comes in different varieties. Yeah.
So here's what happened is that Blue Cross Blue Shield somehow talked the Carpenters Union or their benefits fund managers into doing this.
That's exactly what happened.
My mom used to not have to pay a copay to go see a doctor. Since this switch, $30 every time she walks in the door.
Yep.
She gets bills that she never had before.
Yep.
And
the teachers union in New York was the gold standard, and it happened in New York. You can Google that, New York Times.
Yep.
All of the teachers had that gold, just like with your mother with that union, and they went to the city, they as in these privatized companies, and said it'd be cheaper for you, and they, it's like dry rot, got into the plans, and now they're only paying copay, they're not getting the doctor they want, and it's happening across the country, quietly, very insidiously.
Yep. And I tell you what, and I'm going to give the Carpenters Union hell the next time I get them on the phone.
Please do. I've already given the MEA hell.
Because this is crooked. This is you not looking out for your brothers and sisters. That's right. Bottom line.
That's exactly right, Darren. You think about how hard your dad worked and the benefits that benefited your family. They've eroded that. They've opened the door.
Worked outdoors in negative 20 Fahrenheit weather, up high, building buildings, building malls, building highways. That's the legacy of my father.
Yep.
And I tell you what, let's go ahead because I'm getting upset. Let's go to our next couple of stories here. Some more justice being handed out. This story comes from the Associated Press out of St. Louis, Missouri. This is dated December 29th. A judge has rejected Missouri lawmakers' effort to stop Planned Parenthood from receiving any public funding. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch reports that Cole County Judge John Beadham ruled Wednesday that the funding restrictions were unconstitutional. At issue was a bill passed by the Republican-led legislature and signed by Republican Governor Mike Parson in February to stop reimbursing Planned Parenthood for health care for low-income Medicaid patients.
Wow.
Yeah, once again, it's the Republicans f***ing over the poor. You can quote me on it.
Wow.
And I'm going to be blunt. I'm not going to sugarcoat my language. If you don't like it, that's too bad. While the state's Medicaid program doesn't reimburse for abortions, Planned Parenthood did seek reimbursements for other medical procedures. The group said in March when it sued the state that Missouri was ending reimbursements for birth control, cancer screenings, sexually transmitted disease testing and treatment, and other non-abortion care. Yamil C. Rodriguez, president and CEO of Planned Parenthood of the St. Louis region in southwest Missouri, celebrated the decision, which Planned Parenthood said affirmed a 2020 ruling by the Missouri Supreme Court. She said in a statement, quote, "The Missouri legislature's open disregard for precedent and state law has failed. Again," end of quote. Chris Newell, a spokesman for the Attorney General's office, did not immediately respond to a request for comment from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch or the Associated Press. And let's get
Draconian.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's Republicans. What do you expect?
Yep. Yeah.
And let's get to our next piece of justice out of Kentucky.
This is good.
This is Alejandra O'Connell Dominic writing for The Hill. This is dated December 16th. A Kentucky Supreme Court judge struck down the state's so-called school choice program 2 weeks ago. The state's highest court unanimously ruled that House Bill 563, officially called the Education Opportunity Account Act, as unconstitutional.
Unbelievable. That state, that is such a progressive action.
Yeah.
Michigan, can you hear what they did?
Yeah.
The forte of Grand Rapids Public Schools is their so-called school of choice.
Mm-hmm.
What that really means is, how can we hide the fact that we're failing? We can't teach kids to read and write and do mathematics, and they're going to charter schools. How can we attract them back? Well, let's have it's just like a food wagon. We got more flavors of ice cream than any place else. School of choice. You can leave the school you're at. It's been another George Bush initiative.
Yep.
And Kentucky, they got a Democratic governor down there. The guy's pretty sharp.
Yes, he is.
Can't think of his name right now.
Andy Beshear.
Andy Beshear.
And his dad was also governor and was also sharp as well. I applaud
him and the state of Kentucky. That's marvelous.
Yep. The legislation created an almost dollar-for-dollar tax credit for Kentuckians who donate to scholarship-granting educational nonprofit organizations. Opponents of the bill argued the measure would divert tax money from Kentucky public schools. Supporters said the measure would help open up new educational opportunities for families. Well, that's the biggest line of bullshit right there. Whenever some Republican starts talking opportunity, that is code for we're going to defund the public and we're going to fund private.
Yep. Code
Absolutely.
is the term. Darren, you hit it on the head. Yep. Southpaws has taken some of their words and translated them for what they really mean. We did the word freedom, meaning you can be as stupid as you want in the Republican Party. Yep. And I think Walker and Santos approved that. Today we talked about Medicare Advantage. It's simple. We'll call it the Medicare disadvantage.
Yeah.
It's a great disadvantage. We'll take their terms and turn around on them.
Yep. Real quick, before we go into our off-the-cuff segment this week, we want to quickly mention that Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, who was part of the January 6th committee, announced on December 28th that he has been diagnosed with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which is a type of cancer. It's a pretty serious one, but it is very treatable.
Yeah. That's too bad. Yeah, he's a great man, I tell you. I love Jamie Raskin.
Yep. He expects to have treatment for about 4 months, and it should hopefully get rid of the cancer. At least I hope so. So
let's hope so.
Our best wishes to Congressman Raskin.
That's for sure.
All right. Let's not end on a bummer of a note here. Let's go to off the cuff. I've got 2 stories this week. This first one comes from Bismarck, North Dakota. A woman who brought a wild raccoon into a bar earlier this year will spend 1 year on probation. 38-year-old Aaron Christensen of Maddock, North Dakota, pleaded guilty Tuesday to misdemeanor charges of providing false information to law enforcement, tampering with evidence, and, according to a report published by the Bismarck Tribune, unlawful possession of a live fur bearer. Northeast District Judge Donovan Foudy gave her a suspended 6-month jail sentence and a year on probation. He also ordered her to pay $1,100 in fines and fees.
Yes.
She faced a maximum sentence of about 2 years in jail and $7,500 in fines. According to court documents, Christensen said her family found the raccoon, nicknamed Rocky, on the side of a road and was nursing it back to health when she brought it into the bar on September 6th. A bartender said Rocky did not get loose, nor did he bite anyone, but state health officials still issued a warning about potential rabies exposure. Authorities arrested Christensen on September 14th after serving several search warrants in and around Maddock to find her and the raccoon. According to court documents, she would not disclose Rocky's location. Keeping a wild raccoon is Rocky. Somebody must have loved that Beatles tune, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Keeping a wild raccoon as a pet is illegal under state law, as is keeping a bat or a skunk because they're known carriers of rabies. Yeah. Authorities ultimately euthanized Rocky, who tested negative for rabies. Christensen said that Rocky's euthanization has traumatized her family. And our final off
You can't write this stuff.
Oh, I know. And our final off the cuff this week comes from Kalamazoo County, Michigan. This is Brandon Champion writing for the Grand Rapids Mess. This is dated December 28th. Conservation officers with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources recently had an encounter that is hard to believe. According to an official report, the bizarre incident occurred in early December at the Gordon Neck State Game Area in Kalamazoo County when two conservation officers came upon a PT Cruiser parked at one of the entrances. The man in the vehicle said he parked there to listen to the owls and that he wanted to be left alone. But the officers noticed an opened tall container of natural ice beer in the cup holder. According to the report, they asked the man on a scale of 1 to 10 how drunk he was. His response, quote, "I'm at a 5. I'll be honest, I'm drunk." End of quote. Based on the response, the officers began conducting sobriety tests, but partway through, the man made a face of shock, grabbed his rear, dropped his pants to his ankles, and began defecating on the rear bumper of his PT Cruiser.
You know, the story was almost acceptable, and it blew the top off.
Well, there's more. That was the final straw for the officers. He was arrested and taken to the hospital for a blood draw. On the way there, he noticed that one of the officers was using his GPS and told the officer, quote, "Man, I'm the drunk one here, and I have to give you directions on how to take me to jail, you moron." End of quote. I'm sure he scored a lot of points with that. During the blood draw, the man also mentioned that the nurses were not drawing his blood, but instead said, quote, "It's all beer, not gonna lie to you, pure, natural ice." End of quote. Yeah, so he had ice running out of his veins and running out. Well, never mind. Never mind.
Oh, wow. What happened? What was the charge besides the intoxication?
Well, he is lodged in the Kalamazoo County Jail. Charges were submitted to the prosecutor's office for review. So it sounds like instead of drinking ice, he's going to be sitting on ice for a while at the jail. The jokes write themselves, Jack. It's great.
Yeah, you don't have to create anything. Just take the news. This is good. This one's off the front bumper. This one was
the back bumper. The back bumper.
Oh, back bumper. All right.
Well, Jack, with that, we're out of time for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I am Jack Prince.
Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
Yes, indeed.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.